Hello, my friends, and welcome to What's Up. I'm John Petersen from the Arlington Institute, and we come to you every 2 weeks when Gregg, Braden, and I sit down and just open up and chat about whatever's on our mind for about a half an hour and kind of wander around into this amazing kind of space that's emerging around us that is generating questions and issues and perspectives that most of us have not even come close to thinking about in the past. And so we're happy to have you with us again and happy to have you. Hi, Gregg, and what's up? What's on your mind?
Hey, John, it's good to see you. I am, as usual, I'm coming to you from a studio just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And beautiful summer day. The smoke is waning from the fires here. So we had a very unseasonable snowstorm last week.
Hmm.
Rain in the low country, snow up in the forests. Didn't put the fires out, but it sure put a damper on where they were and gave the fire crews a chance to make some progress. So we're grateful. I just want to thank everyone for all the prayers. Our fires have been on global news, and we've had prayers from all over the world, and they work. So thank you for that.
Good.
You know what, John? There's so many things that have been on my mind, and so many directions we could go. But I'm looking at a really high level. I am just in awe at how quickly the technology has advanced and the techniques and tactics that are being used, this confluence of technology and information to lead the narrative
Yeah.
of the day, depending on what that is, uh, leading people to form opinions and to make decisions in their personal lives, in the lives of their families, in the lives of their communities. And we're coming up on midterms here in the United States of America. So these opinions are going to be expressed in the midterm elections.
It's a huge
Yeah.
thing. What it looks like to me, and you kind of writ large, is almost like two groups that have big supercomputers that are all kind of handicapping this thing in one way or another. Probably using game theory and so on, and to figure out, how does this narrative play? How do people respond? Those kinds of techniques have been very effectively used by the CIA in the past.
Well, they have, and we can talk about that. I think the thing that really has caught my attention is the sophistication of the media, the network media, the advertisements that are being
Hmm.
targeted to young people. I no longer, for years, my wife and I, we don't have television. We have a flat screen where we watch DVDs and movies and streaming, but we don't watch mainstream legacy television. And I was recently in a hotel room on a business trip, and of course there was a television there, and I flipped through the channels, and the quality of the ads that were being directed to young people, they make this technology look sexy, they make it look intriguing, they lead you to believe that you're on the outside looking in if you're not adopting this technology, that you're going to be left behind. You don't want to be the last on your block. You don't want to be only one in your peer group that is not either using a technology or perhaps even more importantly, thinking a certain way. And this is the part that has really captured my attention in recent weeks. Is there are topics that are coming up in the mainstream, and in the old days, John, you and I remember this back in the 50s, 60s, even the early 70s. We had network news, Walter Cronkite. We had ABC, NBC, and CBS. And they would simply say, this is what's up. And sometimes, and that was the news. And after that, they may have another segment that was opinion based. But the news itself was simply stating what was happening, and that no longer happens. And these are very, very crisp and very powerful narratives that are being developed. And when we look at the big picture, I'm a systems thinker. And obviously, there's a big picture, and we know that there is an effort to change the world. There has been for a long time. But that effort has not had a lot of horsepower, not a lot of teeth until technology came along. So we've got organizations like World Economic Forum, for example, very public. They met in Switzerland this last week, posted all over, all over the media, YouTube media and social media, as well as legacy media, their vision for what they think is best for the world. Now, they know that they cannot outright implement this vision. So they're putting the ideas out there, and the media is picking up on the ideas and presenting them in ways that sway public opinion so that we're the ones that are choosing what, in mass, what a handful of people, unelected officials on the other side of the world, are envisioning as a way to move for our world. And most people don't know that, John. This is the thing. They
But
don't
it's
know.
all, yeah, it's all part of it. It's a system, as you suggest, and it's a very organized system that has been put in place, engineered almost, if you will. And so if you control, what you're seeing is this shortages of food. You've got these narrative things. They're driving big disruptive events one after another. They're trying to generate as much fear as they can, and all of that through the media. It's not just what the media chooses to say. It's stuff that's given to them. It's part of the whole.
Sure.
You started out by saying you're impressed with how complex this is. Well, God, this is the most sophisticated and most complex global kind of attempt to drive the planet somewhere else that I think there's ever been.
Well, I think so, John, and so I'm aware of that aspect. The really disturbing aspect for me is that it is tearing apart our society. It's tearing apart our families, and this became really apparent, over the last 2 years, and different ideas about what was happening in terms of public health in the last 2 years. But the tactics that are being used and the way technology is targeting, everyone in the family. If you got a family of 4 people, each of those 4 individuals has their own personalized information funnel that they have come to rely upon and trust. And it's typically different for every one of those 4. The kids are probably, watching Instagram and specific people on Instagram, or the parents might be watching YouTube, or, some YouTube clips of legacy media. They don't want to watch the whole MSNBC or Fox News Network program. They'll watch isolated clips. And so they have come to trust and believe in what they are seeing. And when they get together at the family dinner table, the narratives are so different. It is difficult now to have a difference of opinion and still be cordial. What is happening is the techniques, the tactics are, and I think this is intentional, the tactics are going to the most primal
Yeah.
instincts of fear and anger, about violation and about sovereignty of our own bodies when it comes to health and choices, but it also comes down to sovereignty of communities and nations. And I think this is really what's up for us right now, because there is a movement to organize nations into a more of a centralized form of government. The World Economic Forum is handing that baton off to the United Nations, saying the UN needs to have this. And then there are countries like the United States that don't fit that model.
Yeah.
We have freedoms, we have a constitution, we have an economic system that doesn't fit the model that they are hoping to achieve. So there are narratives about that model that are being very expertly crafted. And these are the narratives that divide people on these most primal issues, like the right to defend ourselves, the Second Amendment. And
Yeah. Sure.
is the Second Amendment obsolete? And on things like health care and abortion issues are certainly up in America right now. And we all know this on the one hand, yet on the other hand, we allow it to polarize us in our communities and our families. And I'm really just very aware that that's happening right now.
Well, yeah, of course it happens. It's happening because that's the only way that you break apart the solid, the solidity of the previous kind of environment. You have to kind of, from their point of view, if you're thinking about this as a process, what you got to do is decompose the whole kind of structure of the thing so that you can redo it again. And I would argue that that's what happening writ large in terms of the reconstitution of the world into a new form that driven by a new human being. I mean, you can't get there from here without huge kind of change. And so
Yeah.
you've got it happening at all different kind of levels in here, and just trying to deal with all of this. The best people that I know of that have an opinion apparently from the inside suggest that this is going to get driven right up to the edge of the cliff.
Mm.
They talk about it as being a near death experience for the United States. And so all of these things are this titanic kind of struggle that is orchestrated and designed to try to break apart the whole system and try to redo it again, I guess. It's
Wow.
just,
Well, in psychological terms, this they talk about breaking social alliances,
yeah,
and that's precisely what we're seeing. We're seeing a polarization, uh, not only in politics, but in families and societies and among friends. And I have friends that tell me at their at the family dinner table, they almost cannot have a family meal anymore because the little conversation they have is so polarized. And so when we look at this, I'm a student of history, and these are tactics that are being used because they work. It's called
sure,
divide and conquer,
sure.
but it's even more specific than that. There was a social activist passed a few years ago, Saul Alinsky, and I know many people are familiar with that name for a
He's from
lot of different reasons.
Chicago.
Yeah, and I'm not picking on Saul Alinsky, but I think in his book Rules for Radicals, he identified very succinctly the tactics that are being used, and the value of knowing this is that if we know it, we can recognize when we are in the midst of those tactics and ask ourselves if it's healthy, if it's serving us. So what he said is, when you want to bring about change, what you do is you pick a target. So that target could be Second Amendment, could be, women's health care, it could be a lot of things. You freeze that target. So you really zero in. And this is where the media comes in, doing story after story after story. And then a new program comes on and new people, and they're saying the same story. They're freezing that. They personalize it. And this is where, this I think is what's changed. They personalize it, driving the narrative to our primal emotions of what it means for us and our families and our bodies. And then they polarize it. So these are the 4 steps. You pick a target, you freeze it, you personalize it, you polarize it. We don't have to look very deeply to see that
Yeah,
is precisely what's happening. It's happening on a global scale, for
yeah.
sure, but it is also happening on a local scale, and it's happening down to the level of to the family unit. And that's the troubling thing, because when we lose our social alliances, John, we lose the common ideas that bind us together, and we become very vulnerable and very susceptible to new ideas that come sweeping in
Oh
that
yeah,
look like they're going to fix everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's a giant, like I say, an engineering project that seems to be happening. And uh, the most interesting and important thing for me is what this new human is going to be about, that will emerge out of this and their influence, because it is a new human and has new values and such. It will then affect and redesign the environment, the new world, and build
Yeah.
a new world that comes out of the thing. And as this all moves ahead and gets increasingly acute and exponential and so on, what I keep trying to do is saying, what's the message, and what is this giving me the opportunity to become? in terms that I haven't been before? How can I see the world in a different way, in a new way? How can I see myself in a new way? And I think to the extent that you just focus on how how everything's going down the toilet, you miss the kind of the emergence and the opportunity in this whole thing.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, John. It doesn't do any good to have the conversation if we don't have something to offer and some way maybe to remedy or to think differently. And I think the net effect, at least in my community and people that I hear from all over the world, number one, they're exhausted from
Yeah.
the conflicting information and narratives, trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong. They're just tired. Number two, they're losing their faith and their ability to trust in any
Yeah.
information. And what that is doing, number three, and this is to the conversation you and I have frequently, it is driving them to to learn to trust a deeper source of truth. It's a personal truth that comes from deep intuition, and that deep intuition, I think, is being awakened in the light of the failure of where we have gotten our information in the past. People say, I don't know what's true out there, but I know what's true for me.
Yeah.
And some of them, it is, for some people, it's spontaneous. It's just gut feeling. But for others who want to take this deeper, there is a science to access the neurons in the human heart that form a neural network that access information differently than the neurons in the brain. So ancients, mystics, healers, intuitives have done this for a long time, but it's becoming more mainstream because the science now has emerged that says, you know what? There's something to this. There are neurons in the heart as well as the brain. There is a neural network. It thinks, feels, and remembers independently. And we have the ability, from the time we're born, everyone has the ability to access this neural network, and it is a deeper form of personal truth. So, well, some people call it a bullshit detector, and we've all heard that before. If you hear something about, anything that is on a YouTube broadcast or legacy media, and there's a part of you that says, man, that doesn't sound right at all. That doesn't
Yeah.
feel right at all. And and some people need to go deeper and find out why, and other people say that's all I need. I just know that that's not true for me. And so what this does is it opens a path for us to become less vulnerable and less susceptible to these new sweeping changes that are being introduced, because we are no longer the victims of the misinformation and the disinformation. And I agree. I think this is where the new human is emerging, and I think it's going to happen. It is happening very, very quickly.
I think that the kind of the messages associated with this, that is to say, the directional messages, by that I mean the personal things that show up and tell you which way to go or something, are you might be able to make a case that they're becoming increasingly subtle, that they're not in your face so much, and what it's driving you into is a space where you're getting lower and lower so that you can feel that you get them and you feel them, and that you're open to the stuff, because
Mm.
there's a cacophony around everybody trying to vie for your interests and your sense of whatever self and your options and your direction and your future, and there's just some little thing way down in there that you got to become sensitive to in the middle of all of this.
Well, I agree, John, and I think rather than it being something new that must be developed, I think it's more accurate to say it's always been with us,
Oh, sure.
but it's been discouraged. I had the opportunity back in the '90s. I was on a lecture tour with Michio Kaku, the physicist and scientist from New York. I think City, New York,
Yeah,
University
New
of New York
York.
City. I think.
He's in New York.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember him saying from the podium. It was really interesting because he was talking about scientists and intuition, and he said, most scientists will downplay the role of intuition in their lives publicly. when you talk to them over dinner, 9 times out of 10, they'll tell you they have an intuitive hit that some physical relationship is exists in the world, and they'll use science then to investigate it. But the whole thing began with an intuitive hit. So intuition is very much a part of the scientific process. And I remember when I heard him say that, and then I had dinner with him that night, and we talked about it. And I think it's true for all of us. Intuition has always been part of our lives. It's discounted and downplayed. And I think what's happening is we are now in a world that invites us to allow that intuition to play a greater role in our lives. And I think we're learning to trust that intuition in ways that maybe we didn't in the past.
Yeah, I've been reading some of Walter Russell's stuff
Mm,
and some more about this process of kind of manifestation and thinking about it in terms of how do you manifest this new world or manifest your new self, or how do you, and so much of it is about having building an image, and a clear kind of notion about
mm.
where you want to go in the middle of this thing, because you can certainly see that you'll be tossed around all over by the waves and the wind if you don't have a course and you know where you're going to go, because everybody's trying to work it one way or another. So it part of the kind of the process of kind of getting from here to there is getting to the place where, as you've suggested otherwise, that you have an idea about who you are and where you're going, particularly where you're going, because then that informs things on a day-to-day basis, and it says that's contributing or that's sending me in the right direction, or maybe that's not. And it highlights the little things that come downstream that are the byproduct of the kind of the manifestation process, and that you can identify them and you say, oh yeah, and you can jump on it, that otherwise it would have just gone past and you would
Yeah,
go.
it sounds like are you talking about Neville by any chance?
Yeah,
Goddard
yeah, of
Neville?
course, Neville Goddard, sure.
Yeah, yeah, that was Neville Goddard, and that was one of the things that I've been reading in recent weeks as well. He was way ahead of his time,
Yeah,
and that's I think that's the way it works, John. The ideas come along and they're planted. They're there when we need them. We wouldn't want to be looking for the ideas now when we need them, but people like Goddard and other people that you've mentioned, um, they made very clear that these resources are available to us. And I think when we look at it from this perspective, so many people are so disheartened, and it's easy to be by looking at the system that's buckling and collapsing
yeah,
on the one hand, and on the other hand, I think the healthy thing to do is just what you said, John. Where does this buckling and collapsing lead us? And inevitably, it's an uplifting answer because it always comes back
sure.
to us being more, having a greater sense of empowerment because we're learning to trust parts of ourselves that we have not even known or maybe have been discouraged in the past. Intuition certainly has been discouraged for males in the
Yeah.
past, but that's all changing now. So I think the whole thing, John, it's happening much faster than certainly than I expected. I knew it was going to happen fast. I didn't know it was going to happen this fast. And if you look at some of the predictions that are out there, whether we're looking at economic models or social models, all of them are saying within the next, I mean, 3, 4, 5 years, and I don't even know if it's going to take that long. We're going to be looking at a very, very different world and a very different nation, and that the things we're talking about are going to become really key for us as we navigate our way into those new worlds and new nations.
Well, as you know, I follow Martin Armstrong, and Martin Armstrong and his computer, which has been around for 40 years and never been wrong. It says that World War III starts in the first quarter of next year. It probably won't be a kinetic war in the conventional and his legacy kind of traditional terms, uh, but that there's something really big that is going to start. And what that then leads to is by 2025 is the beginning of a global civil war, and uh, uh, which is a broad-based uprising about people against their governments, all based around the notion of betrayal, that they've been taken advantage of, and it becomes apparent because throughout this process there are secrets revealed, a more and more kind of unpacking of things that have been kept secret through this period. But all you if you just think of that, which I which I do all the time, uh, you, what you know is that there is more change and disruption in that short period of time than you've ever seen anywhere before.
Mm.
And so, in terms of food and sustenance, and particularly trying to find community and looking for and trying to find new direction, new where you really have to, instead of getting myopic and focus down on whatever the thing is that's in front of your face and what they're telling you or what's failing or blowing up or whatever it is, you just got to get back and see this bigger picture and say, where's this going? What is this presenting me with? How do I,
Yeah, well, there's some reports that believe World War III's already begun, that
oh
we're
yeah,
already that we're in it. I'm not
sure.
sure how you define when that happens, but the point is that the conflict and the willingness to engage in that conflict exists right now, and it is not sustainable. It's
No,
not something that can go on and on. So whatever it is that's going to happen is going to happen. I think something's got to give, John. I think we all feel that. And I'm going to go back to where we began. I think the authoritarian attempt to impose new ways of living in the West are not so successful. And so the method is to present a narrative and to paint a picture that leads people to choose those new ways
yeah,
of being. And that's where all the things we're talking about come in. That's where the nine corporations that own over 90% of the world's media have common links.
yeah,
And it makes it very easy for that information to be disseminated, whether we're talking about legacy media as different. We say, MSNBC is different than Fox. They're given the same story. And then we look at the Washington Post and the Huffington Post and all these, they're owned by the same, nine corporations regulate how
yeah,
we are, how the world is presented to us if we rely upon those things, so that we form the opinions, come to the conclusions, and make the choices that support the ideas of a relatively few unelected, just a handful of
yeah,
people. And I think as we become aware of that, not angry or not reactive, just be aware when those stories trigger us. I think it's really important to ask ourselves why I'm being triggered. If I'm not typically triggered, what is it that's triggering me? Is it healthy? Is it true? And ask your heart, is this true for me? And I think as we begin coming from that place rather than just accepting everything that comes down through those media outlets, we free ourselves from the shackles of that polarization. We free ourselves from being targeted, freezing, personalizing, and polarizing those issues.
yeah.
And that is a tremendously freeing experience.
Well, it's an empowering of the individual rather than a dependency. It's an independence, the uh, flowering, the ability to be able to be yourself and know where you're going and be able to deal regardless of what's on the outside.
Yeah.
And
Well, I agree, John. I mean, these things can only happen when they're allowed to happen. If there's a protest that's organized and nobody shows up, if there's a war that's going to
yeah,
happen and nobody shows up for the war, the game's over. And that's the dangerous game that's being played. We're being polarized down to the level of our families and even within ourselves. People are struggling within themselves, their own belief systems, because of the way that information is being disseminated. So I think as we move into our heart, into
yeah,
our own deep intuition, this is the new human that's emerging, and the conditions of the world are now pushing us to find that part of ourselves in a healthy way. And that's
yeah.
uh,
You,
it's a roundabout way to get there, and that's the way it's going.
yeah, it's you, and you talk about the functioning and the role of the heart and this kind of thing. And for me, at least, as you kind of try to navigate through here, it's important at a different, approaching this from a different direction to have some intellectual understanding about what's going on. You really don't want to be ignorant. This is not an argument, never an argument for ignorance, because if you don't know what's happening and it shows up, then you get surprised and then you get driven into fear. So you need to have some idea, but you can't emotionally attach yourself to it, the heart in this particular.
How do you do that, John? What's that look like for you?
Oh, I just stand out at arm's length and I look at it and I realize, and I run in the back of my mind and say, it's a play. It's a, it's a game. And this is not real in the terms that it all seems to be real. It's like a movie, right? And otherwise you get caught up. The whole thing is designed to get your emotions and to get you sucked into it. And
right, when you're sucked in, you're caught into that ancient trap that keeps us separated from one another. And almost every day, John, I go back to Buckminster Fuller, and he said, you're never going to change the world by fighting against the things you don't like.
Right.
He said, if you want a better world, find a new model that works better, and people will follow that model, and the old model will fall away. And I think there's a lot of truth to what he said. Beautiful man, far ahead of his time.
Good. That's a good point on which to end here.
Yeah.
Because we've run about a half an hour, but thanks very much, my friend, for being for a delightful conversation. It's always fun to do this. And for those of you who are viewing this, we hope that you'll come back and join us again. You can find complete information about what we're doing and the other programs of the Arlington Institute at arlingtoninstitute.org. So thanks again. Take care, my friend Greg, and we'll see you again.
Thank you so much. I look forward to our next.